Hey there, welcome to the Jewish Adulting Podcast. Thank you for joining me today on your adulting journey. Before we get started, can you do me a quick favor? Can you hit the like and subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to this? I promise it's not a lifetime commitment, but when you don't subscribe, it's kind of like coffee without caffeine. What are we even doing here? Or like latkes without applesauce? Are we even living our best life? When you subscribe, you not only give me warm, fuzzy feelings, but you're also helping me bring amazing guests who rely on subscriber counts to know whether joining me is a worthy endeavor. More subscribers mean more epic conversations for you. And hey, if you're feeling extra generous, you can also show your support by becoming a monthly supporter at buymeacoffee.com/Jewish adulting. Whether it's $1, $5, $10, or even $20, every little bit helps make this podcast rolling. Of course, if you're sitting on a cool million or even looking to sponsor the show, reach out to me at jewishadulting@gmail.com. Also, I'm always looking out for engaging, thoughtful, passionate guests to join me. So if you want to nominate someone or want to come on the podcast yourself, reach out. Let's make a podcast shidduch.
This is Rabbi Ben-Zion Schaefer of the Shmooze.com. Jewish adulting is about shining a light on parts of ourselves in order to do Avodas Hashem with all the tools and resources at our disposal. It is an honor and a privilege to have every day to further refine our character and grow closer to Hashem. Take advantage of these opportunities before it's too late.
Hello, everybody. This is Chedva Rose of the Jewish Adulting Podcast. I'm here today with Dr. Mimi Knoll, who is the co-founder and CEO of JOWMA, Jewish Orthodox Women's Medical Association. And she is also a practicing radiation oncologist and mom. And thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Right. I always like to have people on the podcast who are like suggested by other people who have been on the podcast. So I just want to appreciate Rabbi Yechiel Kalish for mentioning you and telling me that you would be a good person to talk to. I think this is going to be an interesting conversation. So, he was the shotgun for me and you to come together to have this conversation. He actually, I know him also from the Cincinnati Kollel, and I know Mimi, who I'm meeting after you, from the Cincinnati Kollel. So I'm just basically going through the Cincinnati Kollel and asking them all to speak. So that's my strategy right now. But thank you so much for being here with us.
So excited to be here. Thanks, Rabbi Kalish, for making the introduction.
Exactly. So I guess what I wanted to start with was if you could tell me a little bit about yourself and about, what your journey was like and how you got into, let's say medicine first, because medicine is something that you grew up with, right?
Yes. So I grew up in Flatbush, and my parents are both physicians. My mom, Dr. Hannah Gelbfish, is a pediatrician in Brooklyn, had an office in the home where I grew up in the basement for as long as I can remember. My dad, Dr. Chaim Gelbfish, is a vascular surgeon who, when I was in high school, actually opened up an ambulatory surgery center on the first floor of the home where I grew up. My uncle, who is a cardiologist, also had an office. My mom had other physicians working with her. So yes, I basically grew up in a clinic without realizing it. My parents are both children of Holocaust survivors. So 3 out of 4 of my grandparents survived the Holocaust. And like many other immigrants, when they came to New York, they immediately started to rebuild their lives and prioritize education, and therefore very strongly pushed their children to become professionals and doctors, many of whom did. So, a lot of doctors in my family. My mother's brother is also a physician, have some cousins. So I grew up in the medical field. I'm one of 5 children. I'm the only one who became a physician and the only one who married a doctor. My father-in-law is also a physician, and my husband is a physician. We were in college together and then did medical school together, residency both in New York while we were living in New Jersey. So yes, very much a medical family.
Okay. Was there ever a time where you considered doing something else?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I actually never planned on becoming a doctor. It's not something that I said to myself as a child, oh, I always want to be a doctor or I need to be a doctor or anything like that. It was more that I kind of had it in the back of my mind as something that I could do if I wanted to. And when I was in college, my parents very much encouraged me, I guess them knowing that I would be able to, handle the academic workload, encouraged me to take all the classes that I would need as requirements. But I didn't actually make a decision until much later in college. And even after I had taken the MCATs and done well, I was still strongly considering going for psychology, which is what I had majored in undergrad in. And thought about doing a PhD or a PsyD in psychology. But again, my parents being who they are and loving being physicians really encouraged me and said, go to medical school, we'll support you, we'll pay for your education, go do it. It's the best profession. And if you decide you want to be a psychiatrist, that's close enough to psychology. If you decide you don't want to practice medicine, you can always decide that then. They really, really encouraged me as, medicine being a profession that was worth the effort. So I did.
Right. So there must have been some concerns about being an Orthodox woman in the medical profession. I can imagine that there are some hesitancies for women to get into the medical practice. Can you talk about some challenges that Orthodox women might face or that you took into consideration as you were sort of exploring this as a possible career?
Yeah, so it's interesting because you may assume that since my mom was a physician that I wouldn't have had any reservations or concerns, and yet I did. And 20 years later, young women have those same questions despite there being even more role models than there were. I obviously had my mom, and there are certainly many wonderful physicians that have been practicing for a long time, even longer than my mom and current physicians, and yet those questions still remain. And to be honest, they're very valid. I don't take it lightly when somebody asks me today, should I become a physician? In the same way that I didn't take it lightly making a decision for myself. And the reason for that is going through medical school, even just getting into medical school, is an extremely difficult process. It requires 120% effort for years upon years. It doesn't let up. It's never easy. You miss out on a lot, and it's very difficult in terms of the stress. And again, it's ongoing for many, 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 many years. So to combine that with, you're dating, you're looking to get married, first of all, questions of who is going to marry me? Is anybody going to want to marry me? That's a question. And then, presumably when I find my spouse, how am I going to hack it? How am I going to be able to take care of a husband, to have children, raise children, religious obligation, and while also getting through school? Because again, medical school is hard for anyone, whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, whether you're religious, whether you're single, whether you're married, kids, whatever it is. It's hard for everyone. It's just one of those professions that is just really difficult. And again, it's not just pre-med. It's medical school itself, it's residency, it's fellowship, and even afterwards, it's not easy. So yes, those questions that I had were reasonable, and those are the same questions that come up today, and I still think that they're reasonable. And if somebody says to me, should I become a doctor? I started JOWMA about 5 years ago, and we've never had an official party line, so to speak. And yet, if you ask any one of our over 800 members, should I become a doctor? Probably 99.99% of them would say no. Meaning, if someone asks you, should I become a physician? They're going to say no. But if you say, this is something I have always wanted to do, I'm desperate to become a doctor, I really want to become a doctor, will you help me? The answer is yes, we will help you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that's like a really different place. I was actually, this is a little like, just stay with me for a minute while I use this analogy, but
sure.
I was talking to someone recently and they said, when I was in high school, I would ask questions about God and religion, and I never felt like I got the answers that I wanted. I always felt like I was pushed off. So I asked her, did you ask a question, and then when they said, come to me later, we'll discuss it, did you go to the person and talk to them later? And she's like, no. So I said, that's kind of how you weed out the people who really want to know from the people who like just are asking it because they're curious or because they do have an interest, and like they're trying to push the class off topic. It's like you can tell if someone is like, I want to do this, how can I do this, versus someone saying like should I do this? It's like a different interest level when someone's coming to you and sort of committing to making it happen and finding out what they need to do to make it happen by someone just saying like, by the way, answer this question for me. I think it sort of weeds out probably those who are just casually looking into it as a, potential career, and people who are passionate and really want to get into it. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's not weeding out for the purposes of weeding out, but it's for the purpose of supporting those young women and young men who should be doctors, right? Because I would never want to encourage someone who wasn't sure, because it's honestly harder than they could possibly imagine. It's this nice idea like, oh, I want to become a doctor, and yet it is so difficult. But our community desperately needs those doctors who are destined to be doctors. Our community desperately needs those physicians who are desperate to become physicians. And there's a very leaky pipeline where you have all these young men and young women who want to become physicians, who are desperate to become physicians. But instead of them getting there, it's a leaky pipeline. So as they go through that pipeline, they go through their young 20s or mid 20s, they sort of fall out of the pipeline because it's leaky, because they get discouraged, they get bad advice, they start their studies too late, they don't study properly, their application isn't done properly, they don't perform in their interviews. So all these young people that should become doctors, because they're the ones who are so committed, they don't get there. And that is really, really unfortunate. And that is why JOWMA has grown so considerably, because we are really providing a tremendous network of support for young people who want to become physicians. We provide free mentoring, networking, support, application help, interviews help. I mean, every kind of support that someone could possibly need. And then through medical school residency and beyond, supporting the doctors so that they can be the physicians that our community so desperately needs. Because again, practicing medicine today, as we all know, is increasingly more difficult. And yet our community desperately needs physicians to be practicing who understand the community, are sensitive to the communities, are from the community, understand the very specific health challenges and knowledge gaps that are prevalent in our community specifically.
Right. So you mentioned something pretty interesting, which is this leaky pipe, which I don't think we have time to really discuss all the breakdowns and where this leaky pipe exists, but there's definitely something to it, and I think a lot of people could understand where that might be. However, you started this organization specifically for women. Is there a organization for men?
So no, there isn't. There are many wonderful networks of physicians that have cropped up over the years that are primarily WhatsApp groups. But I would say JOWMA is the only 501c3 that is providing, 24/7 support that is also very much focused on specifically the mentoring and the networking. So helping young people get into medical school, supporting their careers, and also specifically taking on community health and public health initiatives. And those are two things that JOWMA is the only organization in the frum community that are doing.
Right. So it sounds like there would be benefit to encouraging the young men in our community to pursue, I think, because of specifically around the men, and we'll just talk about this for a moment because it's not the area that we're going to be talking about today. But, when I just think about the 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 path that a lot of the from boys go, where they stay in yeshiva and then they go to base medrash and then they go to dating, and college might be in there somewhere. And it gets sort of like mushy, and like you said, applications and studying and dating at the same time. It can get like really messy. So if anybody listening out there is a doctor and a male and wants to think about mirroring, I'm sure Dr. Knoll is available for. I'm giving your services away for free.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we do. I do run JOWMA as a volunteer, by the way. We do have staff, and we have over 800 members. A significant portion of them volunteer and are engaged with the organization on a daily basis, including by volunteering their time to mentor young women and increasingly young men. So we just had our conference in January at the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York City. We had over 500 participants between the conference and the dinner, and we actually had quite a few young men who were pre-med who came for the support, the networking, the mentoring that we were providing. So we do have many male pre-med students, medical students, residents, attendings involved also, though obviously that is not our primary mission, and it wasn't our mission at the outset.
Right,
yes.
Right.
Is it critically needed? Yes, it is. Absolutely. Because again, everybody's road obviously to becoming a physician is a little bit different, and there certainly isn't a one size fits all, but I think every physician would tell you that starting your pre-med journey after you're married with 3 kids, and you're close to 30 years old and you're just starting to think about taking your prerequisites, that is absolutely not ideal if you are looking to become a physician. And if somebody knew they wanted to be a doctor when they were 16, 17, 18 years old, I think everybody would agree we probably should be helping them pursue that goal a little bit younger.
Yeah, absolutely. So you actually discuss on your website and various places that you sort of had a defining moment while at NYU that shaped your career path. Can you talk about that?
In terms of what specifically?
In terms of the direction you wanted to go in your career.
So I, was in medical school. My husband and I were lucky enough to do medical school together. I got married in my first year of medical school. My husband was applying. Thankfully, he got into the same school, which is certainly not a guarantee. And I took a year off when my oldest was born so that my husband caught up to me, and we did our 3rd and 4th year together. And then my second son was born also when I was in my 3rd year of medical school. And I was kind of going through the rotations one by one, and I really didn't find anything that I enjoyed or that I could see myself doing. Aside for surgery, actually, I loved surgery, but I knew that residency wasn't something I was interested in pursuing while raising young children. So I decided not to do that, though we actually have many surgeons in JOWMA who are absolutely terrific moms, and they have been able to hack it and just be the most amazing physicians. For me, it was not the right move. And basically, I was not sure what I wanted to do. My father-in-law, who's a urologist, came home from shul and told me, he met Dr. Gedgerman, who is a radiation oncologist, and said, this is the best kept secret in medicine. It's such a fantastic field. My father-in-law did know a lot about it already since he treated a lot of patients with prostate cancer with radiation. And at the same time, my husband said to me, I think this is a really good field. You should really look into it. So between those two things together, I thought, okay, let me look into this. And I did, and I absolutely fell in love with radiation oncology right away. So I got connected with Dr. Michael Zalewski, and I did some rotations with him and research, and, the rest is history. So I work actually part-time now at LIJ, and then I run JOWMA 24/7 as a volunteer the rest of the time.
Wow. So let me ask you sort of like a hard question that I kind of always wanted to ask doctors anyway. So this is, I guess, my time which is you're particularly in your field. I'm imagining that there's a lot of loss. And, I wonder what kind of things you do to handle that loss that comes inevitably. You can't save all the people all the time. And it seems like there's a very high risk of burnout. What kinds of things do you do to support yourself to prevent those kinds of issues?
I really appreciate that question because I think it's something that most people don't think about. And it's the case for physicians across specialties, not only in oncology, which might be obvious, but in many specialties, probably all for that matter. And it is really important for everyone to think about, simply because, again, if our doctors aren't available to us, ultimately our own health is going to be impacted, right? So the thought of how do we support our doctors as a community is also something that's really important. And the answer is it's hard, and there isn't a single answer, but I would say some things are, number one, just like you said. So just acknowledging the fact. Yeah. So I think acknowledging that it's hard, acknowledging that you need support, and reaching into the networks such as JOWMA, which again provides a very unique community. When we poll our members to say what's important to them about being a JOWMA member, over 80% say it's the community. And again, you would think, doctors are out there, they're practicing every day. No one really thinks about the support that doctors need because people tend to focus on what they need, which is the health, right? The health care, the medical care. And yet doctors need support too. And that's what we're providing. That's what we're helping with. So it happens very frequently where somebody has a patient with a difficult situation or a difficult outcome or difficulty navigating taking care of a patient, and our doctors and medical students will reach out for support and are able to receive that support from someone who very much understands what it is to be in their shoes, whether it's because they've taken care of a patient in a very similar situation, faced a similar loss, or understand the unique challenges that come across of being in that position of taking care of someone else. So it's both the clinical support, the emotional support, and the social aspect as well.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we haven't really talked about so much, we mentioned that your grandparents, survived the Holocaust. We haven't really mentioned your observance and how that affects and impacts your practice, your medical practice, and how that impacts your commitment and commitment to volunteerism and giving back to the community. So the question that I want to ask here is what, just because we are Jewish adulting, we're not just adulting, what part of, let's say, your upbringing, your religious upbringing, or the teachings that you've learned through your education, would you say have impacted the decisions that you make, on a professional level and on a personal level that help you, stay balanced and focused?
So I think that practicing medicine as a frum woman is very meaningful because there is really just so much sacrifice that goes into it that I think it's above and beyond what a typical physician goes through. So every physician, going through training, being pre-med, is overwhelmed, is busy. And there's a lot of sort of imposter syndrome that goes along with it. Knowing that you don't have Shabbos to study, knowing that, many of us, look for Shabbos accommodating or Shomer Shabbos residencies, knowing how much time we need to take off for family obligations, raising children, since most of our doctors get married young during training when no one else is even thinking about having children. So there's so much that you pile on top of, simply more than, quote, being just a physician, that I think it requires a significant amount of buy-in and decision-making literally every day. And while that's extremely stressful, it also leads to a very strong commitment to your values, right? And why you're doing this. And I think when you ask yourself a question over and over again, why am I doing this? Is this the right thing? And you also have that conversation with your family, with your spouse, with potentially even your children, it really reinforces why I'm doing this. So you have a tremendous amount of commitment to a certain decision, which is ultimately an extremely selfless one, right? Because especially, again, practicing medicine today, it is so difficult. You are not paid enough. Most people have hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans. Practicing medicine itself is extremely difficult, has high rates of burnout, as you mentioned. So our doctors are doing it for very, very selfless reasons. And that ties back into being frum, right? So we know that as a frum person, we are constantly trying to do chesed, trying to help other people, trying to make the world a better place, helping the community. And I think it all ties back to, again, being frum. And certainly physicians in general are selfless, absolutely. I would say majority of physicians fall into that category. But I think being frum just adds another layer because, again, the sacrifice is even more, I would say, even larger and even more difficult.
So are you saying that when you're a physician, when you're in medical school and you're pursuing this career, in some ways, it's even more, you have to choose orthodoxy, you have to choose God, you have to choose your values on a regular basis and constantly make the choice to live and practice an orthodox life, where maybe in a different profession, it just sort of comes naturally because there aren't really any challenges and it just sort of comes easily and there's no sacrifices in the way that a medical professional might have. Is that what you're saying? That you're choosing it in a more conscious, mindful way?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think every profession requires, buy-in. I think every profession, requires sacrifice if you're going to succeed. I think specifically in the medical profession, because the road is so long and requires so many steps and sacrifices along the way, I think it just automatically, leads to a level of buy-in and commitment that is very, very unique. Because by the time you get to be a practicing physician, you've just been doing it for so long. And, there's just so many sacrifices that go into it that there's a level of commitment that's already there. And I think doing it as a frum person, coming out the other end, still being frum, still raising your family, still, giving back to the world, being visibly Jewish in an era of growing anti-Semitism, dealing with anti-Semitism in the workplace, in the medical field. There's just so much that goes into it. I think those things really very much reinforce each other. And I think that's why our members are so idealistic. And despite the fact that they are so busy, whether it's raising families, whether it's, being a sister, a mom, taking care of your patients, our members still have a tremendous desire to volunteer and to give back, which is why our organization has grown so much so fast, because our members really want to give back even beyond their clinical practices. They still look for ways to provide public health information, to, work on campaigns, to be liaisons to government, to, do webinars, to be, on the medical committees of their schools, to combat misinformation. These are all things that our members are looking to do, and we're able to provide a platform for them in a way that is honestly shocking to me and therefore so inspiring on a daily basis. Because how do you take someone who literally has no time and yet still wants to do even more and to give back even more?
Right, which actually leads me very nicely into when you and I first talked, we discussed, back to the burnout issue, how to prevent burnout. And you mentioned that volunteering helps prevent burnout. Can you talk a little bit more about that? How does, these, like the people who are members of JOWMA who are so busy and have so much time, why do they take this time to volunteer? How is that helping them work through the challenges and able to, persevere?
Yeah, so I think it's a really good point, and something that, to be honest, when we started JOWMA, I did not know about really or think about, and it certainly wasn't the goal. And yet I see how our members are able to take time, or to be honest, create time out of their busy schedules to mentor young women who want to become physicians, to combat misinformation, to be liaisons to government, to work with other community organizations. And I see that they do it in just an unbelievable way. And those women are actually less burnt out than their counterparts who don't have this network and this platform. And it's something that I've been able to observe just over the years. And it does actually make a lot of sense. Because when you have that sense of agency, which is a word that Dr. Donna Zwas, who's a cardiologist and a member in Israel, taught me that word. When you have a sense of agency over your time, over your career, of course you're not going to be burnt out, because your own mind is telling you, I have time. I'm able to decide what I want to do. I'm able to do things that are meaningful to me, instead of just constantly meeting another target, or, just seeing as many patients as, my office manager tells me I need to see so we can pay our bills, right? Which is unfortunately how many medical practices and hospitals are run nowadays, and clinics. So creating space in your life to volunteer is extremely meaningful, and that act in and of itself combats burnout, in addition to the relationships and the actual chesed that you do, which is also a way to combat burnout and actually to increase happiness, right? So we all know people who volunteer, who do chesed, they're the happiest people, right? Because they are always helping other people, and that act in of itself makes them happy. So I strongly encourage all people, all women, not just physicians, to volunteer, to find ways to do chesed, and even when you're overwhelmed, to find the time to create the time, because that in itself actually makes you less overwhelmed.
Right. Well, I think you mentioned something to me, which I think is an interesting note, which is, if you're doing, a lot of people get into jobs that they love to do, like things that they like to do. They like to do medicine, they like to do hair styling, whatever it is. And then it becomes a job, and then it becomes less enjoyable. And that also can sort of lead to burnout, because something that you used to love is now something that you do all the time. And you can sort of, get like, do I really want to do this? You just might lose that passion. And so you and I had talked about people, volunteering as a way to do it, like you said, with their own agency. Like, this is how I want to spend my time. This is what I love to do. This is how I want to utilize this gift and this talent in a way that puts my own stamp on it, my own, feeling of, whatever it is, mastery, or whatever it is that brings you to that profession in the first place. I was speaking to a woman who worked for a Jewish organization, and she says, I really need to get out of Jewish communal services. And I said, why? And she said, because every event that she goes to the Hanukkah thing and the Tu B'Shvat thing and the Rosh Hashanah thing, and she's forced to go because it's her job, and she never is going because she has an interest in that speaker or that event or that topic. And it's actually burning her out to Judaism. And she's like, I have to get another job because I'm not doing it because it's something that I desire, I want to look for. It's because this is my job. So I think that volunteerism, in that same way, is a way for you to take back some of that, like, love and passion for the things that we do if we've chosen to go into an area that we are, as a profession.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think those are really, really good points. And I would also add that, you know, every job has things that you don't enjoy. It's part of being an adult, right?
Right.
And along the lines of why your podcast is so awesome. And, it's just one of those things of being an adult and having a job. It's not all going to be fun and games, no matter how excited you are about your profession, if you're lucky enough to be excited about your profession. But I think volunteering, like you said, provides avenues to do interesting different things that can reignite the spark, and also introduces you to a network of other people who are also passionate about whatever it is you're volunteering with. And I think the networking itself also combats burnout, because you get to hear from other people who are doing things in different ways. You share ideas, you bounce ideas. It's social. Those interpersonal connections are so important as well. And I think all those things together have a really big impact.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of volunteering. So, I'm mindful of the time. I know you have to go. So I just wanted to sort of ask you a personal question about, if you could go back and give your younger self some advice, what would you go back and advise yourself, the younger you?
I really appreciate that question. I wish I could go back and tell my younger self to trust myself more, to have faith that it will work out, that the hard work will pay off. And that's advice that I give to young people today.
To trust their instincts and to sort of trust the process that it would go it's going to work out the way it needs to work out. Is that?
Yeah, I think being stressed about being stressed,
Yeah.
is just very, very unhelpful. And it's something I certainly have to continue to work on. But I think especially when you're a young person, whether it's raising kids, whether it's a marriage, whether it's going through schooling, or working on a corporate ladder, stress is part of life. And I think being stressed about the stress, can certainly make it worse. So I think trusting yourself, trusting your instincts, doing what you need to do, looking at the long game, realizing there's a light at the end of the tunnel. These are all things that are really important. And something that I tell my mentees all the time is, don't ever make a decision during times of stress. So you're going through something really difficult. That is not the time to decide, I'm quitting my job, I'm quitting school, whatever it is. When things calm down, that's when you make a decision. And I think that's advice that I try to take myself, and I also highly recommend to anybody else, whether they're a physician or not.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. Make sure that you're not hot, you're not hungry, you're not tired, you're not stressed out. Your vitamin D levels are where they need to be, and then make a decision. Don't make it when
exactly.
You're absolutely
when you're
yeah.
Exactly. When you're stressed out because, you're working on Halamite and all your family and friends are enjoying, and you're feeling mom guilt and stress, and, that is not the time to decide, what, I actually didn't want to be a doctor. What, I actually should look for another job. That's just not the right time. Just recognize it for what it is. It's stress. It's hard. You'll get through it. In a couple of weeks from now, when things calm down, maybe you're right. Maybe you do want to change gears in your life. That happens. You should do that, but not when you're stressed out. That is not the right time.
Excellent advice. Very wise words. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it was so nice talking to you. Continued Hatzlacha. I'm going to put all the contact information for those of our listeners who'd like to get in touch or learn more about your organization, so they can go to your website and follow you. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Have a great day. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Views expressed by me, your host, and my delightful guest are not necessarily reflective of each other's views, ideas, or life choices. Sometimes we're on the same page and other times we're not.